So thank you so much for joining at this strange hour. We did start sharing what we were getting out of by being here. And hopefully we'll carry on sharing and getting to know each other a bit through the next hour and a half. But yeah, I'm Izzy and I work for Quakers in Britain with Ellis. You may or may not have seen lots of us or bits of us or none of us on the Moodle stuff, but we've been enjoying reading your introductions and messages and stuff, so that's been great. So yeah, the session's been recorded so that other people who can't make it can listen in. If you didn't make the last one, Ellis did, as a punishment for forgetting to record it, make a little edited short version. So you can see him whizzing through the last webinar on the Moodle if you haven't seen that already. So today what we're hoping to do is do a quick check-in, do lots of the things that you might do in a peace education session, you know, with other people, children, young people, other people. We're going to have a little look at what we've been learning so far, hopefully again in a kind of interactive way where you can share some bits that you've been interested in or comment on them or talk about how they apply to your context. We're going to have a little look at the Two Mules poster and idea around creating win-win situations to conflict. We will have a little break there when we can grab a cup of tea or something. And then we're going to really go into peer mediation and have a look at that and think about the things you might pick out if you're training young people in peer mediation, what it is and why you might do it. And obviously some of you will be much more experienced or aware of that than others. We can share our experiences and have just a quick look more broadly at restorative approaches. Does that all sound okay as today's agenda? Yeah, okay, major objections so far. Okay, so we thought by way of a check-in, this is a very old and probably familiar to lots of people picture of the blob tree. And so the idea is there's lots of little blobby people doing different things on the tree, and some of them are happy and confident and some are feeling cross or left out. And so what we're going to do is just share, in terms of the course so far, which blob person best represents how you're feeling about, you know, your learning or peace education, where you're at on the course. And I think we will do that in threes. So you can just share in your little group, and then maybe a couple of those threes will very quickly feedback. We don't necessarily need to go into much depth or even names, but just to give a flavour of where we're at with the course. So I think you need to copy the link, or is the link in the chat?
The link is in the chat, so okay. Make sure you've clicked on it so that you can see this picture in a browser when you're not with us. So we'll just give you a second to do that. And
just so I have put myself through things that we ask you all to do, I'll just share where I'm at with the course. I think is that little blob person on the kind of left above the first branch, and just being kind of, I think, sort of helped up, or maybe offering help to the person sitting down kind of opposite. And I think that's because I love being on a journey together, and I love being part of the course, and the fact that people make time for this. I'm not like at the top feeling super chuffed, because I kind of always feel I wish there was more time to learn from you all, more time for interaction, but I do feel kind of inspired by everyone being here on this. Ellis, shall I just pass to you? And then we'll go into groups.
Sure. I feel a little bit like the one in the bottom left, just sort of hanging on, because earlier today the Quaker computer system broke, so I couldn't get hold of any of the files to do with this webinar. So we were very close to having nothing to do at all, but we've sort of rescued it just in time. But I felt a bit like just barely holding on to get it ready. But you can be wherever you like on the blob tree. Shall I open the rooms then?
Yes, please. So you should find yourself hopefully in a room with one or two other people, and you'll just have a couple of minutes to share where you are on the tree, and then come back, and maybe one or two people can tell us how their partner in the group was, where they were on the tree. Welcome back, everybody. I hope people had a time to speak in their groups and to listen to each other. And welcome to Susan, who's here even though her puppies chewed through some of her cables. She's joining us via her phone, which I think is dedication to the cause. Okay, maybe we can just hear back from one or two people how people in their group were feeling. So we don't even, necessarily need to know who's where, but just to give us a flavour of how people are doing. If somebody wants to either raise their virtual hand or give me a wave, you could just perhaps share from your group. Oh, thank you, Malcolm and Helen. Sorry, Helen. Yeah.
Well, we're all kind of arms up, and we're also, none of us are teachers, so we have that in common. So we're a bit kind of, feeling like we've got something in common with someone.
But we believe the ideas are very, very transferable to all sorts of other social and organizational situations.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. And I guess we're all teachers in a way, aren't we, in life and with people we come across, and I really believe that, actually, but by modeling stuff and by having conversations with people. But that's good to remind us. If me and Alice keep talking about school contexts, you can bring in other contexts. It's just the ones we're probably most familiar with, although we've both worked in a range of different contexts as well. Thank you. Does one other person who maybe wasn't with Helen and Malcolm want to just give me a wave? Helen, thank you. Helen Stevenson.
Okay, because I know somebody else did as well. Yeah, I think in my little group, we kind of just thought we were kind of at the base of the tree still, maybe reaching out a bit more, but also feeling slightly not overwhelmed, but kind of concerned that we're not keeping up with the level of the work on each week. I know, I started off really well on week 1 and read everything and watched everything. Week 2, I kind of did about half of it, and I haven't actually, I have to admit, I haven't even looked at week 3 this week. So there's kind of like, we kind of started off really well, and then it's kind of like, we need to catch up, we need to keep up. So yeah, we kind of felt we're kind of at the base of the tree reaching up at the moment.
Okay, lovely. Thanks so much for sharing that, because that's actually really useful to know for us. And one thing to remember is that this material will be on there, Moodle, for a while. So you'll be able to dip in and catch back up with things, hopefully. And just the fact that people are here is brilliant, because we can learn from each other now.
Yeah,
so that's
and also the week 3 is actually quite light on content, because we're focusing mainly on this live session. So the content from last week sort of continues into this one, so you can see those 2 weeks as kind of a piece. So you'll probably catch up this week.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. So I think we're going to do a tiny bit of refreshing now. So actually we can do a bit of sharing in terms of what people have learned so far. So I think Alice is going to guide us through that with the next slide.
This is a bit of revision, really, of things that you will have come across in the videos, in the content so far. So some of it might look, oh yeah, I know exactly like that is. Some of it you might think, oh, that rings a bell. Or you might think, what is that? I don't understand. But one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it to someone else. So I'm going to give you a moment to look at what's on the screen, look at the different pictures, and perhaps choose one that that does mean something to you, and have a think about something that you could say to explain it. You don't have to give us every detail of it, but a little explanation of what it's about, and perhaps a reflection about it, like how it might be useful in your context. So we can just pause quietly while you scan through. It doesn't matter if some people choose the same one, but we'll hear a few examples. So you're looking for which one you're talking about, brief explanation of it, and a short reflection on how it might be relevant for you. See 3 hands. So perhaps we'll start with Chrissy. What can you tell us about?
Well, I did do some cramming this afternoon, and I watched a very good film on conflict, and I really like this table, which has the different conflicts styles, which has a turtle and a shark and a fox and an owl and a teddy bear. And it got me really thinking about my own relationship with conflict and what my particular styles are. Is that the kind of thing you're wanting us to do? Am I doing it?
Exactly, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so you think that's useful for you?
Yes. I thought it was very useful for me personally. I haven't quite wrapped my head around how I might use that with young people. Yeah. But yeah, it kind of it sort of stood out for me. I like the animals. I like the idea of these different animals for the different styles.
Yeah, my experience of that is that children and adults get really into that conversation. They're really interested to say, oh no, I'm really like this one, or oh I'm not like that at all, but maybe I should be. People are very up for that kind of chat. So thanks, Chrissy. Helen, what about you?
The mirroring the feet, the two footprints and mirroring, and I watched the video on that one, and I thought that is actually really, really useful, because we quite often say, well, think about what the other person's feeling and think about how they feel, but unless you actually put yourself as you did into each other's footsteps, you don't really get the true feeling of how that other person might be feeling and thinking. So yeah, I can see that being very useful with children, but certainly with adults as well. And I can think of a number of situations where I would like to be able to use that when I'm maybe dealing with some of the adults that I have to work with as well. So.
Yeah, it's quite a powerful, potent one, because if it's dealing with real emotions, that one, you can use it in a drama context quite a lot as well, and it can be quite playful. But yeah, I think in a way that empathy footsteps activity is the same as what you're trying to achieve in peer mediation, which we'll talk about later, in terms of trying to achieve that insight. But you're right, there's in pedagogy, some of you might know, we talk about the different kind of learning styles as well as conflict styles. We have learning styles. So some people might be visual, some people might be more aural, what they hear, some people might be linguistic, and some people might learn through kinesthetic learning. Probably we're all a bit of a mixture, but with that empathy footsteps, when you swap places, it's kinesthetic learning, as in learning through movement. And because there's a movement connected to it, it kind of stays with you a bit. Can anyone else tell us about something on the screen? Malcolm, go ahead.
I like the conflict escalator, and I've been thinking about that, partly in relation to the Falklands War. It's the 40th anniversary next year, and I've been doing some work on that, and that's a very good model for thinking that through. To be a bit more relevant to now, I think also interesting to think through the coming war between France and England over the fish. I live in Brighton, and we had the Navy visible off the British Navy, one British warship off our coast in the summer, reassuring us that our fish were safe. It's obviously gone a bit worse since then. The intervention hasn't happened back at the beginning where it should have. And I'm praying that Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron will do some arm wrestling in Glasgow before they leave, to settle it with something peaceful, like a macho display that will satisfy the pair of them without damaging anyone else.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you're sort of applying it to that international conflict lens, because my experience using the escalator is much more in the interpersonal layer of peace education, and understanding how, like, two people might be in conflict, and then how the audience of a few peers might make that fear of losing face more intense. But yeah, nations and governments are terrified of losing face as well, and that it's very difficult to de-escalate once you've reached that point. Thank you, Malcolm. Susan, I thought a minute ago I saw you waving your hand on the video, but I could be mistaken. Are you there?
I'm here. I'm just struggling to see the screen. I'm trying to figure out how it's actually working properly, so I lost that page. I agreed with the first lady who spoke actually about the conflict that, you know, with the animals on, because it really made me think about how I view conflict, and I'm rubbish at it. I'm very much avoid or just go along with anything to sort of keep the peace. And it's, I think I'm in, especially sort of in probably more so in personal life, but I definitely need to become more assertive and not shy away so much from conflict. But I do have a real yeah, I think a real block about conflict. I do try and avoid it.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that in itself, Susan. Like that can be the best choice a lot of the time. All of them have their role, and the other good news is that I think they are all teachable and learnable, and you can sort of prime yourself. And that's something else that we do again when we're training peer mediators. They need to be assertive when they're helping other children, by which I mean being quite firm and quite calm with the other child, and some children are naturally quite like that, or they kind of bring that to the table already, and some need to practice it. And there are games and activities you can use to kind of build up that assertiveness, which you can play in a circle as well, like please give me your chair is one that I like, which you can find in the Peacemakers pack, Learning for Peace, which is in the reading list. We'll move on in a couple of minutes. Do we have one more we could squeeze in before we do that?
I think Alexis has her hands up.
Go for it, Alexis.
Hi. The Coke bottle, the bottle of fizzy pop. I thought that was really powerful on a personal level about calming down when a conflictual situation emerges, and so much is in play, past panic, sort of everything swoops in to amplify the situation that's almost overwhelming, and you don't know which way it's going to go. It can make you retract, it can make you retaliate, and the idea of calming down, stepping away, and also thinking, just as Malcolm said, how that extends to countries, politics, groups communicating with each other, being able to sort of stand back perhaps and be more kind of diagnostic about it perhaps.
Yeah, I really enjoy doing that activity with young people because of there is an actual drama to it, and actually, like, a shaken up bottle of pop is kind of a sort of threat, and it gives a kind of energy to the whole space that something might happen. And I can't remember if I said this in the video, but I usually fill it with cold coffee so that it's inert. So then it's like magic when you open it and nothing happens. And it's like, we can calm down. Izzy, was there anything you wanted to pick out that we haven't talked about before we go on?
Just maybe on the conflict styles, you know, I thought it was kind of honest of Susan to say, oh, I'm rubbish at conflict. And I think actually part of the reason I'm so interested in conflict is because it is hard and knotty. And what I like about the conflict styles is it helped me think that there isn't one right way to be. And actually, once you start being more aware of perhaps your default style and the other styles, it can help with thinking, well, okay, here I might normally be an accommodating teddy bear, But if I'm in a conflict with someone who is displaying more of a kind of shark-like behavior, I might need to try to be more of a fox, or I might need to be more of an owl, because it's not going to work. And just sort of becoming more aware, I think, can be useful. But I wondered, Alice, if you just wanted to say something about how perhaps that or the Coke bottle links into the kind of the brain stuff, if people haven't had a chance to see the video, you know, on the kind of flipping your lid.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I think the cola bottle and the image of the hand and the different layers of the brain certainly link together. So the cola bottle being shaken up so that it's kind of fizzy and ready to explode is like the brain when it's when we've lost access to that kind of neocortex, kind of like really critical reasoning, and we're locked into the fight or flight response, just that reptilian brainstem part of the brain. And I think there's something about that kind of self-insight that a person can have of, I am in crisis right now, like something has scared me, something has worked me up, and they then don't need to reason lots and lots about that. They don't need to solve the problem. They can just recognize, oh, that's happened to me. And then if they've got a simple strategy in that scenario, like remove themselves from the situation, like do something that they know calms down, like talk to someone they know will help. Though if that strategy is nice and simple and memorable, then it's easier for them to kind of access, even though their brain might not be doing everything you'd like it to. I mean, mine's like that at the best of times, to be honest. But and priming people to think about that idea of flipping your lid. So you use the hand as a model of the brain, and you feel it building up, stimulus coming up your brain stem, and then you flip your lid, and that's the point of crisis. Everyone can kind of, again, it's kinesthetic learning, be primed to kind of think in those terms. A really good piece of advice I had from a peace education colleague years ago was talk about how it feels in the body, because I was talking a lot about the words of conflict, about the difference of ideas, and actually recognize, like, oh, it's a knot in my stomach, it's a pain above my eyes, it's tension in my face, it's clenching my fists, it's like a bit of a blood coming to the skin, all those kind of physical things that people can recognize. Oh, something's happening to me. Sorry, you set me off then, Izzy. I went off on one.
No, thank you. And if that didn't make sense, there is a video which expands upon more of that. But I just thought it would be nice to kind of draw the links a bit with some of the very different pictures on the screen for those of you that haven't caught up with everything this week. And for me, they really do map together, because being more aware of how your body's reacting, like the Coke bottle, flipping the lid, or going up the escalator, helps you, I think, then think about which conflict style is going to be useful to me now. And I may not stay in my default shark here. I might need to be more compromising, and just to be sort of aware of that is hopefully helpful and helpful to other people. Okay, thank you everyone. I think we're going to move on to looking at Two Mules, aren't we?
Indeed. So this is going to be another breakout group activity. Those of you who are Quaker or Quaker adjacent might be quite familiar with the image that we're going to use for this activity, and it's actually been a bit of an Easter egg in lots of the videos in the background, if you haven't seen it already. But what you're going to do is, this link is in the chat, so everyone needs to click on that, and it will take you to a screen that looks like this. What I need you to do when you get there into your breakout room is make sure that the number at the top matches your breakout group. So if you're in breakout 2, then use the little arrow to shuffle along to number 2, and then you'll be on the right screen. Then your job is to sort out the 12 bits of the story. There are 12 rectangles of the story of the Two Mules into this grid to tell a story. You're going to be doing it as a team in your breakout group. I think we'll do groups of about 3 again. So drag and drop.
Perhaps it's okay.
welcome back, everyone.
People are smiling and laughing. That's good.
I could see quite a lot of activity on the Jamboards. Virginia and Susan were with us, so they were watching with us as things magically moved. So well done for having a good go at that. I think I'm screen sharing group 1 at the moment. Is that right? Okay, so could someone wave at me if they're in group 1? Okay, Flora, can you tell us how that went for you?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun moving the mules around. They don't quite figure it out. They try and talk to each other over the wheat. Then they try and kind of run at each other. They kind of want to be friends. Then they do some thinking, and eventually they end up being lovely friends and eating lots of lovely hay. So all's well that's end well.
I love it. It's not identical to the original order, but it's a beautiful story that you shared with us. So thank you, and I'm glad you had fun. And this is Group 2's version. Can you wave at me if you're in Group 2?
I think that's
Katie, why don't you tell us how that went for you?
Oh, no,
Are we through?
Yeah, so I think there were a few at the bottom that we had yet to put into place. 2 of us were familiar with the poster, we probably ought to admit at the beginning. So we had the donkeys each seeing their bale of hay and trying to get it, and then realizing, so the 2 of them eating together should be left. Oh no, that's right, no, we've got it, sorry. And then realizing that perhaps this isn't the best way to go about it, and then attacking the hay bales one at a time together, and ending up with nothing left at the end.
Yes, that's a big clue, isn't it? That one of the hay eventually disappears. You've got that at the end. And Group 3 had this. Yeah. Anyone for Group 3?
We're going to run out of time.
Well, they all look in a logical order. So I think you've all got some kind of story of cooperation. Bear with me a moment, and I'll change what I'm screen sharing, and you'll be able to see the original poster in all its grandeur. So the activity you were just doing is my attempt to replicate what we do with bits of paper in the classroom. So you'd give a small group of children it cut into strips so that they could work with it that way. So what have we got?
I think me and Alice, I think both of us have also done it where you actually have a rope tied around 2 children. And that's quite fun, and they do really pull apart, and then once they figure it out, they can, and there's versions you can play where it's how many times can you get to each side, and they compete originally and then they sort of jump across. There's various sort of versions that are fun.
So this is the original poster. Do you want to tell us any more about what it's telling us, Izzy?
Well, I think it was created after the First World War, wasn't it? So it did have that macro vision of, countries need to cooperate, win-win, but obviously it really applies, as Malcolm was talking about the Falcons, and then we were talking about interpersonal. I think similarly this poster, it's absolutely the steps we get into when we get into a conflict and sort of take positions, so we can think of the conflict escalator as well, and it can be used with really quite little children. There's a woman called Elise Jacobs that me and Alice know, who teaches early years in the States, and she visited Friend's house, the Quaker building in London, about 20 years ago, and bought this poster and has been using it ever since. She has a peace corner in her classroom. Oh, there she is, Elise, with her puppets, and she puts 2 little stools in front of it, and when children get into conflict, she says, oh, would you like to go to the peace corner? Or they take themselves off there, and they often think about where they're at, which stage they're at in the story, and then see if they can figure it out, and she finds that really useful. There's 2 of her her students are there actually in the peace corner, and she thinks often we talk about peace but we don't give enough visual representation of it in our kind of learning spaces, and that's really important. And I love that, yeah, they're figuring out where they're at with it there. And there was that example of doing it with the physical rope as well. And yeah, I just wondered if anyone wanted to comment on that. So obviously the idea is trying to sort of get us away from thinking win-lose and towards the idea of thinking creatively and getting to win-win situations, which is very much the kind of essence of conflict resolution, I guess, is that thing of there's always lots of possibilities, aren't there? But we don't stay long in that space. We spend longer in the kind of into our positions pulling apart space. So just if anyone had any reflections on that, or the whole kind of concept of win-win. People happy with that? No hands. Sorry, go on. Was that Susan? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, gone again. Can you see? Yeah. So I was quite interested in this thing about with the like the little pyramids things where it said about needs. Not so much thinking about the win-win thing, about the actual need behind the how the conflict had arisen, because working in early years, that it's really important, obviously, that you figure out what the root cause is of the conflict, or why the child's getting angry or whatever. So I was kind of like really interested in that part of it.
Yeah, there's some lovely stories, actually, some conflict resolution kind of stories around things like children arguing over an orange, and how easy it is to go in and go, right, we're going to cut it in half, and I feel like I do that as a parent sometimes, right, this is the answer, before you know what the problem is. And in this particular story, one child wants the juice of the orange and the other wants the rind of the orange for making the cake, and unless you find out what is actually going on, what are the needs, what is the conflict, you can't get to a solution that would work for everyone. And also how often we take away the power from other people of coming up with their own solutions, by going to try to resolve it. And often with the best of intention, we go in to resolve, don't we? We go in to fix and to solve. And actually what would happen if we tried to give people the tools to work it out themselves, the space, the support to do that? Yeah, and there is this problem or this question of what if one mule is a lot stronger, so the sort of power dynamic in conflicts, and you can have some interesting discussions with children and with people about kind of what can happen or what does happen when there is a very unequal power dynamic, and of course you can then come on to the issue that you might need help, you might need third-party help or intervention, and peer mediation is just one example of that, and it might not be the right thing in every situation, but it's one option. It kind of adds to the toolbox, I guess, of people, if there are mediators or others that can help with a situation.
And more on that after the break.
So peer mediation or mediation is obviously just one type of a kind of restorative approach or one type of conflict resolution, and some of you may have had experience. Do you want to give a little bit of a jazz hands if you've had experience of either being a mediator or experience of mediation or peer mediators in your school or where you work? Oh, we've got a little bit of Virginia and not many others. Okay, so
and Helen has her hand up.
Okay, so some experience of mediation and peer mediation. I think me and Ellis both get quite excited about peer mediation because we have been in contexts where it has made a massive difference to the culture of a place, and where young people have got loads out that system being there, and even just the training. We've also been in lots of places where it doesn't get fully embedded and kind of doesn't really work, because it needs to be part of a broader kind of restorative culture. Those are just some pictures on the screen there of young peer mediators in the playground, and it's often quite successful in primary schools where it has somebody really kind of championing it and where it fits, but it also can be done in secondary schools. Often is harder to sustain, but there's a picture of a young woman there who was a mediator in a school where it's very successfully run, and the young people were so good at mediation they even got invited to go and mediate in the community. So they were actually out with an adult mediation service helping to mediate conflicts in the community. So that was a pretty inspiring story. But we're going to have a think about what is mediation first of all before we go into the peer mediation bit, the process itself. And broadly speaking, it involves a third party where there's a situation of conflict, and that third party isn't trying to come up with the answer, the judgment, as in maybe arbitration, but that person is trying to facilitate dialogue and discussion so that the disputants can come up with a solution themselves, or kind of a way forwards themselves. And that's just the same whether it's adults mediating a conflict or whether it's young people mediating a situation. And peer mediation is a little bit of a mouthful. We sometimes talk about, should we just say young mediators or young people mediating, but young people often in year maybe 5 or 6, so they're sort of 10 or 11 in a primary school, can be trained in mediation, and then they have bibs or hats or badges, and they can be out on the playground, and where children get into conflicts, they can then go to the mediators for the mediators to help them resolve that conflict. It proves, again, where it's supported well and kind of run well and fits with the culture of the place, it can be really successful and effective. So that's from a kind of fairly little survey that gives you an example of the kind of success rates and whether things made things better, which young people generally say yes, you know, it does really work. And CREST is one of the organisations, Conflict Resolution Education in Sheffield, that has been doing training children in mediation for years, and they've got a little bit of evidence, but there's not, you know, there needs to be more, it needs to be looked into more, there needs to be more research into kind of how and when this works, but the evidence of what there is out there suggests it is effective. In terms of how it's run, usually there's 2 mediators, and they sit kind of opposite-ish at a bit of an angle to the disputants, and you may or may not have observers. I don't think usually in a training situation you might
observers are more for training than
yeah,
if you were doing a real mediation. Yeah.
And the training might last for say 3 days, something like that. There's another organisation in Birmingham, the West Midlands Quaker Peace Education Project, or Peacemakers, and they do a lot of this sort of training, going to schools for about 3 days, and they often offer sort of maybe the whole of year 6 a bit of conflict resolution training, and then they'll offer a smaller group who are going to be the mediators, the more in-depth training, and the actual training. Ellis has done more of this than me. I've been lucky enough to be involved with some of it, and I just think it's fantastic, and we're going to give you a little tiny flavour of some of that training tonight.
So something that I'd like to ask you to do is to fill in a table like this one for a mediator: the knowledge, the attitudes or values, and the skills that someone would need to be a good mediator. But you don't have to start doing that right away. You might have had chance to watch one of the videos about peer mediation on the Moodle already, but in case you haven't, we're going to play you a 2.5-minute primer on mediation now, or peer mediation, and this video, it won't talk you through every element of it, but you'll see lots of little snatches of mediation at work, and you can have a think about what are those skills and what are the attitudes and knowledge that these mediators need to be doing what you see them doing.
That's my brother's ball.
What do you think you're doing?
Did you write that on Facebook? Facebook.
But I need it now!
Well, I've got to come to your house anyway. You do that!
Why would I be talking about you?
You stop it! Yes, you did.
Wherever the school is, there will be small fallouts.
Children always have conflicts.
All of a sudden you get a problem.
I think their bullying goes on.
I think conflict resolution is an important life skill.
Mediation provides a safe space for people to express their feelings and release their emotions.
Every day there are 2 peer mediators on duty.
Come on, let's go. It's about sorting out people's problems and disputes. We won't take sides, we won't tell you what to do, and we won't gossip.
When the other person's speaking, you can't interrupt them, so no name calling, no starting other arguments, anything like that.
Do you agree with these ground rules?
They're the ones who know the most about conflict, they're in it.
Can we hear your side of the story?
Well, what do you think happened?
Well, last Saturday, me and Edgar went shopping. So what you're saying is...
I woke up, went to go and get my phone and it wasn't there.
How do you feel?
Upset.
I feel guilty in a way.
We didn't think it would make Holly as upset as she actually is.
What could the solution be to this problem?
And maybe we could both help.
Not going to talk about each other, you're going to be friends.
I'd like to be friends again.
No, it'll be fine.
I'm glad you've come up with a solution. I would just like to say sorry.
Sorry. Friends then?
Yeah.
We're basically just a bridge helping them connect.
You make a difference.
Helping others.
It's been of enormous benefit to the students.
It's made this whole ethos of school much calmer.
I've gained more knowledge about things like pre-mediating.
It makes me feel good knowing that people have us to rely on.
Responsibilities and tools to be more self-reliant.
Making people feel better.
If nobody were doing it, then there'd be loads of arguments on playground and everything.
Okay, so that video is pretty short and sweet, and you can see, you know, some of the videos are quite high production values and some of them are pretty basic, but it's because they're from lots of different organizations and schools where peer mediation was active and thriving from years past, but it's still alive and well. And I've had a couple of meetings with people this week where it seems like demand for it is really coming back since the pandemic. There's like a new thirst for peer mediation. So returning to that question.
So, peer mediation or mediation is obviously just one type of a kind of restorative approach or one type of conflict resolution. And some of you may have had experience. Do you want to give a little bit of a jazz hands if you've had experience of either being a mediator or experience of mediation or peer mediators in your school or where you work? Oh, we've got a little bit of Virginia and not many others. Okay, so
and Helen has her hand up.
Okay, so some experience of mediation and peer mediation. I think me and Ellis both get quite excited about peer mediation because we have been in contexts where it has made a massive difference to the culture of a place, and where, you know, young people have got loads out of that system being there, and even just the training. We've also been in lots of places where it doesn't get fully embedded and kind of doesn't really work because it needs to be part of a broader kind of restorative culture. Those are just some pictures on the screen there of young peer mediators in the playground, and it's often quite successful in primary schools where it has somebody really kind of championing it and where it fits, but it also can be done in secondary schools. Often is harder to sustain, but there's a picture of a young woman there who was a mediator in a school where it's very successfully run, and the young people were so good at mediation they even got invited to go and mediate in the community. So they were actually out with an adult mediation service helping to mediate conflicts in the community. So that was a pretty inspiring story. But we're going to have a think about what is mediation first of all before we go into the peer mediation bit, the process itself. And broadly speaking, it involves a third party where there's a situation of conflict, and that third party isn't trying to come up with the answer, the judgment, as in maybe arbitration, but that person is trying to facilitate dialogue and discussion so that the disputants can come up with a solution themselves, or kind of a way forwards themselves. And that's just the same whether it's adults mediating a conflict or whether it's young people mediating a situation. And peer mediation is a little bit of a mouthful. We sometimes talk about, should we just say young mediators or young people mediating? But young people often in year maybe 5 or 6, so they're sort of 10 or 11 in a primary school, can be trained in mediation, and then they have bibs or hats or badges, and they can be out on the playground, and where children get into conflicts, they can then go to the mediators for the mediators to help them resolve that conflict. It proves, again, where it's supported well and kind of run well and fits with the culture of the place, it can be really successful and effective. So that's from a kind of fairly little survey that gives you an example of the kind of success rates and whether things made things better, which young people generally say yes, you know, it does really work. And CREST is one of the organisations, Conflict Resolution Education in Sheffield, that has been doing training children in mediation for years, and they've got a little bit of evidence, but there's not, you know, there needs to be more. It needs to be looked into more. There needs to be more research into kind of how and when this works. But the evidence of what there is out there suggests it is effective. In terms of how it's run, usually there's 2 mediators, and they sit kind of opposite-ish at a bit of an angle to the disputants, and you may or may not have observers. I don't think usually in a training situation you might
observers are more for training than
yeah,
if you were doing a real mediation. Yeah.
And the training might last for, say, 3 days, something like that. There's another organisation in Birmingham, the West Midlands Quaker Peace Education Project, or Peacemakers, and they do a lot of this sort of training and go into schools for about 3 days, and they often offer sort of maybe the whole of year 6 a bit of conflict resolution training, and then they'll offer a smaller group who are going to be the mediators, the more in-depth training, and the actual training. Ellis has done more of this than me. I've been lucky enough to be involved with some of it, and I just think it's fantastic, and we're going to give you a little tiny flavour of some of that training tonight.
So something that I'd like to ask you to do is to fill in a table like this one for a mediator: the knowledge, the attitudes or values, and the skills that someone would need to be a good mediator. But you don't have to start doing that right away. You might have had chance to watch one of the videos about peer mediation on the Moodle already, but in case you haven't, we're going to play you a 2.5-minute primer on mediation now, or peer mediation. And this video, it won't talk you through every element of it, but you'll see lots of little snatches of mediation at work, and you can have a think about what are those skills and what are the attitudes and knowledge that these mediators need to be doing what you see them doing.
That's my brother's fault.
What do you think you're doing?
Did you write that on Facebook? But I need it now. Well, I've got to come to your house anyway. You do that.
Why would I be talking about you?
You stop it. You haven't done anything wrong. Did you?
Wherever the school is, there will be small fallouts.
Children always have conflicts.
All of a sudden you get a problem.
Unfair bullying goes on. I think conflict resolution is an important life skill.
Mediation provides a safe space for people to express their feelings and release their emotions.
Every day there were 2 peer mediators on duty.
Come on, let's go. It's about sorting out people's problems and disputes. We won't take sides. We won't tell you what to do. And we won't gossip.
When the other person's speaking, you can't interrupt them, so no name calling, no starting other arguments, anything like that.
Do you agree with these ground rules?
They're the ones who know the most about conflict, they're in it.
Can we hear your side of the story?
Well, what do you think
happened to you? Well, last Saturday, me and Edgar went shopping.
So what you're saying is...
I woke up, went to go and get my phone and it wasn't there.
How do you feel?
Upset. I feel guilty in a way because
We didn't think it would make Holly as upset as she actually is.
what could the solution be to this problem?
And maybe we could both help.
Not going to talk about each other, you're going to be friends.
I'd like to be friends again.
No, it would be fine.
I'm glad you've come up with a solution.
I would just like to say sorry.
Sorry. Friends then?
Yeah.
Basically just a bridge helping them connect.
You make a difference.
Helping others.
It's been of enormous benefit to the students.
It's made this whole ethos of school much, much calmer.
I've gained more knowledge about things like pre-mediating.
It makes me feel good knowing that people have us to rely on.
Responsibilities and tools to be more self-reliant.
Making people feel better.
If nobody were doing it, then there'd be loads of arguments on playground and everything.
Okay, so that video is pretty short and sweet, and you can see, you know, some of the videos are quite high production values and some of them are pretty basic, but it's because they're from lots of different organizations and schools where peer mediation was active and thriving from years past, but it's still alive and well. And I've had a couple of meetings with people this week where it seems like demand for it is really coming back since the pandemic. There's like a new thirst for peer mediation. So returning to that question, here we are. So what are the knowledge, attitudes and values or skills that the mediators need to do what you just saw them doing? You can see some coming through: patience, understanding of the process, knowledge, listening, impartial, empathetic, firm but fair, like it, and understanding. Knowledge of the process, yeah. You need to know what steps you're going to use. Impartiality again. Non-judgmental, yeah, crucial. Yeah, so Flora's picked up on that. So what you're saying is that ability to reflect back what they've heard, which is something we're going to practice in a minute. Yeah, listening, being calm, confident, kind, well-trained. Yeah, that's something that's really important, that you don't rush the training, that you really invest the time. And fairness, yeah, I think fairness is kind of the mirror to the process. So you need to be very good at the process, and the process is a fair one. So if you're good at holding those two, I care about it being fair, so I follow the process. I follow the process, so I'm being fair. Understanding brain structure and the emotional rational response levels. That's really interesting. You know, I think when I've trained peer mediators, we haven't actually gone into that brain structure idea. We have talked a lot about emotions and needing to calm down, but that would actually probably be a good integration to talk about that flipping your lid in your brain idea. Interested in the group working, Helen? Do you want to say more about that?
Start. Oh, someone who's interested in seeing outside of themselves, and the individual can, you know, has an interested in the group working, a social interest.
Got it. Yeah, so that they actually care about that kind of group dynamic functioning well, being effective. Thank you. I think we've got a great list there. This slide sort of shows a map of some of those skills. So you might have already seen this in your reading. This chart is from the Quaker Council for European Affairs, who made a good resource called Peace Education Making the Case. And these are all peace skills, attitudes and knowledge, but the ones with green blobs I've kind of identified as particularly relevant to peer mediation. But I don't think this list is comprehensive. And what we've just done is an activity that the peer mediators can do for themselves and kind of identify what they need to be good at to do their jobs. So we're going to give you a little bit of a taster of what it takes to train a peer mediator, with the caveat that, like I said, it takes 3 days. So we're not going to cover all of that right now, but we can give you a little bit of an intro. So one of the things that is very important is the actual process, and it's underpinned by principles which the mediators follow, and they actually tell the people in conflict these things right at the beginning, that they're a kind of promise, a commitment. So first, they promise that they will not tell people what to do. So it's not a bossy process. It's not like Izzy says, oh, we'll slice the orange in half and that's the solution. The solution has to come from the disputants, the people in conflict. And then they will not take sides. So lots of you identified that idea of fairness, of impartiality. So the mediators are making that promise. We're not taking one side or the other. They're not going to kind of decide, oh, this person's been naughty, this person's been unfair. That's not for them to comment on. And they also promise that they won't break confidence about it. We sometimes say they won't gossip about it. There's a little bit of a caveat we have to have here, because of course children are a protected group, they can be vulnerable, and it's not possible for a child to promise another child, I will keep secrets about you from adults. So a child might say something like, we won't gossip about your problem, but we might need to tell a teacher, or they might name a teacher to make it seem safer. So we might need to tell Izzy. But the idea is it's not going to be spread around the school what you say in your mediation. And it's helpful to use the actions to remember them, so you can have a go at these with me. So the first one is the wagging finger of telling people what to do. So you can say with me, we will not tell you what to do. Again, we will not tell you what to do. Lovely. And then you can keep your finger up. And this time it's side to side, a bit like a ticking clock. We will not take sides. Again, we will not take sides. And then finally, and we will not gossip about your problem.
Not gossip about you.
Lovely. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Just see if you can do that again without me.
Won't tell you
Won't tell you what to do.
Take sides.
Not take sides.
Then we won't.
Beautifully done. I can tell you're all paying really good attention. Thank you. And again, every time I do this, I have to go back.
I can see now why people find it really hard to conduct choirs online, don't they, on Zoom? It's tricky doing it all at the same time, but the children love those visual aids, and I think they're useful for us too, aren't they?
Yeah, I like them. It's nice to give a bit of theatre to them, because the children are holding quite a lot in their heads to kind of remember the process at the beginning. I think by the end of the training, it becomes second nature. So like Izzy said, the process is pretty much identical to what you would do in an adult mediation. So you hear both sides of the story, and then you reflect it back, and then it's for the participants to come up with a solution. But for children, we need to break it down a bit. So CREST, that we mentioned before, uses the acronym GLIDE to break it into 5 stages: greeting, listen, ideas, decision, and end. So at the beginning, you greet them in a really warm way, establish some of the ground rules that you're going to need for the mediation to work. Then you listen to one person, reflect back what they've said. You listen to the other person, reflect back what they've said. And the reflecting back is helpful because it means that the other disputant hears it in the dispassionate voice of the mediator, instead of from the other person who they might find it difficult to hear. Then ideas. So these are possibilities for solving the problem. They might not be great ideas, but it's like a brainstorm. It's generating as many ideas that might solve the problem from both sides as possible. What might make you feel better? What could you do that would improve things? What would you like the other person to do that would improve things? Just try and get a really creative discussion. The mediators might talk about, can you tell us about a time when you've enjoyed spending time together? What did you do then? So they're trying to create a kind of positive energy. But of course, at some point you have to decide, what are we actually going to do? So that's the decision on what the solution is. Sometimes with older students in the secondary school, they write down what the agreement is because there's a bit of detail to it. With younger children, probably it's quite simple. And they're just making promises to each other. Sometimes it kind of, they go and have a little talk to each other after the mediation, just to kind of firm it up. In the video that we watched, there were quite a lot of the children saying sorry to each other, which is great. It's fine. Apologies can be very effective, but it's not a necessary component of your solution for them to apologize. It has to be meant. If you've ever been told by someone bigger than you to say sorry and you didn't really feel sorry, you know what that feels like, and you know how plausible that apology would be to the other person as well. So it might be an apology, but it might be something else as well. And then just the E of GLIDE, ending it in a really positive way with lots of enthusiasm and energy. So we can't go through all of those skills, but we're going to give you a quick go at one of them now. So what we, well, Izzy, do you want to explain a little bit about this?
Oh, very quickly, so we've got time to practice. In the training, we talk about blaming language. It's one of the things that the children often really pick up on as quite crucial in conflict. It's on that conflict escalator when you start sort of taking positions and you start blaming. So when they are in the training, they get to identify what is blaming language. And we basically talk about 3 types. So we talk about mind reading. Again, we might do signals. So that's something like, you did that on purpose, you know, so it's said in the conflict, but you don't actually know that that's true. Another type of blaming language is labeling. You might do something where you put like a post-it note, a sort of image movement. And that's something like saying to someone, he stole my book. So it's projecting an identity of being a thief. It's anything which, yes, carries a kind of a blame, and it might involve a bit of mind reading as well. And then the third type of blaming language is exaggeration, where you might have some kind of movement or ask them to come up with the symbols or the gestures. And that might be something like, you always do that, or he never shares. So quite often in a conflict, you'll hear those different types of blaming language. So what we're going to have a quick go at now, I think if you can, you're going to go into pairs, and if you can access those links, is partner 1 is going to read the story, and partner 2 is then going to reflect it back, taking out that blaming language, and then you're going to have a go the other way around, so you each get a chance to practice changing the blaming language. Flora, I understand you have to go. Glad you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us. So Ellis, if you're putting people into groups, just not to include Flora.
Yeah, I think yeah, so Susan, just need to move you to work with Helen, and then we've got perfect pairs. Okay, so again, there are links in the chat. Make sure that you've clicked on both of them so that you can tell the stories. Do you want to just have a go for the benefit of the video, Izzy?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a blame story, and you can reflect it.
Okay, not using the same ones. You're just going to make one up.
I'll make one up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So on my way into school, I saw Fred, and Fred was like, giving it all that, and he was like shocking me with his eyes, and I knew he was going to start something, because he always starts things, Fred. And he was like whispering to his friends and pointing at my feet, and I said, "What are you talking about, Fred?" And he was like, "Your trainers are rubbish." And that was in front of like everyone, and everyone laughed. And he was just doing it to humiliate me, and he does that to everyone because he's such a bully. They're a bit old shoes, but you shouldn't say that about people.
Okay, thank you. So on your way into school, you saw Fred, and you saw that he was talking to his friends, and you thought that he'd sort of seen you, and perhaps he was looking towards you, and you were a bit worried about what he was thinking, and you asked him what he'd said to his friends, and he said that he said something negative about your trainers. Have I got that roughly right?
Yeah.
He said your trainers were rubbish, and yeah. Okay. Can you tell me how you feel about that? How did you feel?
Well, I was really mad at him because he embarrassed me in front of everyone.
Yeah, you felt hurt when he said that, because they were old trainers, but it wasn't nice to hear that. How did you feel about my reflection, Alice, on story? Did I take out too much?
I think you took out a good amount. I think I didn't actually put that much blame in.
Oh my God, you put in loads of blame. He was a bully. He was like,
what did you take
shark eyes? Oh, he was giving you shark eyes. He always does this. He talks about you. He's a bully. Yeah, he was giving you bad looks. He was talking about your trainers and said they were rubbish. I felt there was absolutely stacks of blame. That's interesting that you didn't think so. So I felt like I wanted to affirm that feeling of being hurt. So I didn't want to take out too much, but I also realized we needed to kind of lower the tempo.
Yeah, I think it's interesting whether to use direct quotation.
Yeah, do you think I should have said he said your trainers were rubbish or not?
I think that's legitimate if it's the words that came out of his mouth. But I don't think it was wrong to say he said something negative about your trainers. I think like perhaps the word negative isn't not every young person.
Yeah. Well, when I said that, because I was struggling to think, how can I say he said your trainers were rubbish without saying he said your trainers were rubbish? And
my trainers are pretty rubbish.
I like those pink ones. When I said he said something negative, I thought that's not giving enough validity to your experience. So it is tricky, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And the flip side of that story, because we do use one a bit like that.
Oh God, we're nearly out of time, aren't we? Sorry.
Yeah, I've closed the room, so just using the last 40 seconds. It might be that from Fred's point of view, he was actually had a bit of a plan to be a good guy and offer a spare pair of trainers that he had to me. And maybe he was kind of trying to show off a bit about it at the time and didn't think about it would embarrass me, but he wasn't deliberately trying to embarrass me.
Yeah, there was definitely some mind reading going on as well as blaming.
Welcome back, Helen. Hi, Susan.
Have you been managing on your phone, Susan? Or you're muted? Susan, you're still. Oh, there we go.
Right, got it. Yeah, so I couldn't see the writing, so I did the feeding back.
You reflected back.
Yeah.
And how did you find that? So hopefully people are all rejoined now. Susan had difficulties because she's on her mobile, but maybe we can just hear, how did you find reflecting back without the blaming language? Was it difficult?
I was kind of because I write everything down, so I was trying to make notes, but it's difficult to write everything down quickly. So yeah, you've got to really think about it, about which bits to take out. But yeah, maybe, just trying to concentrate on the facts.
Maybe if you found it really easy, we can have a quick jazz hands up in the air if it was easy. If it was kind of middling, bit tricky, maybe halfway. And if it was really hard, you can put your hands right down. Okay, so I think most people found it middling to difficult. It is something that we practice in peer mediation, so the mediators get a chance to practice and listen, and something that they enjoy doing actually, and often do very well. I think as adults we sometimes overthink things a little bit. Ellis, do you want to? Sorry, I've got a little person. Yeah. He's just joined me.
Hello, little person.
I might go back to sleep in a second, slightly throw my train of thoughts. But do you want to, any other feedback on the blaming language? Or does anyone else want to share anything?
Yes. So I'm not oversharing, I don't think, but it reminded me of couples counselling, and it totally triggered me. I could feel my stress levels coming up, but we had to do that in couples counselling, so I've done it before. It's a good process.
It's a sort of linguistic skill is one way to teach it, right? Of like, if you hear the word always, don't repeat the word always, and you can kind of do it at a technical level. Or, and I think actually this is the level that some young people really get it, is you do it as what's the fairest way to report that? What won't make the other person feel bad? So at a kind of empathetic, attitudinal level. And because sometimes they might use one of the words that is technically blaming language, but because they're being very kind of earnest and gentle and thoughtful about the way they're expressing it, they don't kind of trigger the other person with the way they phrased it. So it's kind of a technical skill and an attitude again, I think, to be able to reflect back without blame. Alexis, when you gave the thumbs up, was that a hand up or just a?
No, it was agreeing. It was very much agreeing with Helen. It was a relate run marriage preparation exercise. When you do this, I feel, as opposed to you make me feel like this, just rehearsing it. But how powerful, you know, to go through Jack and Jade's confrontation was it's a real reminder of how we just add so much drama and catharsis to every single exchange. You know, Jack probably wasn't talking about Jade, and vice versa. It was someone else who'd annoyed them yesterday, or it, you know, we're really just carrying around all these dramas in our heads, and if there's a drama that chimes with it physically, brilliant, we can bring everything in. So the power of that mediation to do that. And I love what you said, Ellis, that how can you say that without hurting the other person's feelings? It's a powerful, because you're looking to resolve it, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And little known fact, Jack and Jade are now married and living in a semi-detached in Slough. So.
No, true. No.
We're at time. I'm just going to share one kind of big idea with you before we go, which is the kind of wider context that peer mediation might fit into. Oh, that's just for you. Mediation was successful. Well done. So you could call peer mediation a restorative approach because you're doing it with people, and you can see it's on the top right there. But you can map a school's responses to conflict in different ways. So there might be the authoritarian in the top left, where they do it to the children, like say sorry, go and sit in the corner, don't talk to each other for the rest of the day. It's the school has just enforced a solution. There's ignoring it, where the children are just left to get on with it. Maybe that has an advantage sometimes because they might learn from a kind of messy, sort it out for themselves process. And then there's the permissive acting for, where you're like really doing all the work for the children and being like, oh, don't worry, he didn't mean to say that, it's going to be fine. Oh, I'll look after you, I'll look after you. Oh, you can't agree about how to play football. Here, you have a football and you have a football. It's going to be fine. And the teacher is just working as hard as possible to fix it. So you have that kind of range of approaches. A bit like the conflict styles, it's not that these are intrinsically wrong. You might need to be authoritarian sometimes just to keep people safe. Like if someone's about to jump out of a third floor window, you don't necessarily want a restorative conversation then, but you can move things into the restorative box in the end. So mediation is one example of that, and we'll kind of explore that a bit more in other contexts as the course goes on. We are just 1 minute over time. We will leave you with a journaling activity, which is just to kind of reflect on what we've talked about today, and particularly about the idea of restorative. So in your workplace or your team, how is conflict handled? What are the opportunities for conflict resolution, education, and restorative approaches in that context? So basically, could you use more of this kind of practice? But also, what are the barriers to using those more? So that's just something that you can reflect on for yourselves. And thank you very much for joining us. I'll post the video when it's ready on the Moodle, and I'll also post the slides so you can look back at everything that we've talked about. But thank you very much for joining us.